The Arizona Territory in the early 1890s was a land of wide horizons and louder silences, where the wind carried the smell of dust, mesquite, and untold stories. Jack Harper had spent most of his 30 years riding across that land, running cattle on his modest ranch outside the town of Red Butte. He wasn't rich, not by any stretch, but he was steady, hard-working, and stubborn in that quiet way frontiermen often were. Jack never chased fortune. He believed in earning things: money, trust, respect. Luck, to him, was something people blamed when they didn't want to admit their own choices. So when he rode into Red Butte one Saturday and saw a noisy crowd gathered around a traveling fair, he didn't expect to stay long. Fairs meant noise, tricks, and overpriced lemonade, none of which appealed to him. A barker in a bright red vest was shouting at the crowd, "Step right up. Test your luck. One ticket could change your life." Jack would have ridden right past if old Miss Hensley from the general store hadn't spotted him and waved her handkerchief like a signal flag. "Jack, buy a ticket," she called. "Who knows? You might actually win something for once." People nearby laughed, not meanly, but with the good-natured humor small towns thrive on. Jack felt his ears warm. He dismounted, tied his horse to a post, and approached the booth just to satisfy their teasing. "How much?" he asked. 50 cents for a chance at the grand prize," the barker said, wiggling his eyebrows. Behind him, a large banner showed a chest overflowing with gold coins, though Jack doubted very much that the winner would receive such a thing. Still, with the crowd watching and grinning, Jack dug out the coins and bought a single ticket. "There," he said, "but if I win a sack of potatoes, you're all sharing it." Laughter warmed the air, and Jack headed back to his horse, intending to get home before the heat grew unbearable. The next morning, as Jack was repairing a corral fence, he spotted a dust trail kicking up along the road. A rider was galloping hard toward the ranch. Jack stood, shading his eyes. It was Billy Turner, the sheriff's nephew, a boy who never rode that fast unless something dramatic had happened. Billy slid off his horse, panting. "Jack, they're looking for you in town. You won the grand prize." Jack blinked. "What? The fair people said you gotta come right away." Jack nearly laughed. Him, win anything? Impossible. His luck usually ran in the opposite direction. But the boy looked so excited that Jack finally wiped the sweat from his brow, saddled up, and headed toward Red Butte. When he arrived, the crowd parted with a strange, almost nervous anticipation. The barker in the red vest motioned him forward. "Congratulations, Mr. Harper," he said. "You've won our highest reward, a true marvel of the frontier." Jack frowned. "What exactly did I win?" The man grinned broadly. "A living treasure." Jack felt a cold prickle down his spine. He had no idea what the phrase meant, but something in the crowd's uneasy silence told him his life was about to change in a way he never imagined. The barker's grin didn't sit right with Jack. The words, "living treasure," rolled around in his mind like a loose horseshoe nail, small but dangerous. People around him exchanged uneasy glances, a few whispering behind hands. Jack stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching on the dry fairground dirt. "All right," he said, voice steady. "Show me." The barker gestured toward a canvas-covered wagon at the edge of the square. Two men pulled open its wooden doors. The crowd leaned in. Jack felt his pulse thump once, hard. Inside stood a young woman. She wasn't what the banner had promised, no exotic creature or performer, no illusion, no spectacle. She was human, tired, proud, and entirely out of place amid the carnival noise. Her wrists were bound loosely with a rope, more symbolic than restraining. The sunlight caught the coppery undertones of her skin and the long, dark hair braided behind her shoulders. She stood tall, gaze steady, unafraid but watchful. "This," the barker announced grandly, "is your prize. An Apache girl, valuable, rare, a real frontier trophy." Gasps rippled through the crowd, not admiration, but discomfort. A few people shifted away. Even in a rough territory, most decent folks knew this was wrong. Jack stared, speechless for a long moment. Then his jaw tightened. "This isn't a prize," he said, each word sharp. "She's a person." The barker rolled his eyes. "Come now, Harper. She was taken in a raid months back. Folks trade these captives all the time along the border. We're simply including her as part of the festivities. Legal enough. Legal." Jack took a step closer, anger rising like wildfire. "Since when does a fair get to give away human beings?" The barker shrugged, clearly irritated. "Look, you won. Take your property and go before I call the sheriff for disorderly conduct." "This isn't disorderly," Jack growled. "This is disgusting." Behind him, Old Man Creedy muttered, "Never should have let these traveling shows come through town," but no one else dared speak up openly. The tension thickened like a dust storm. Jack walked toward the wagon, ignoring the stares. The woman, no, not woman, he reminded himself. A person with a name, lifted her chin as he approached. Her eyes were dark, sharp, filled with a mixture of weariness and unbroken spirit. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then replied, voice low but strong. "Nila." Jack nodded once, then pulled the hunting knife from his belt. The crowd gasped as he sliced through the rope binding her wrists. The rope fell away, fluttering like a broken promise. "She's free," Jack announced. The barker stepped forward, face reddening. "You can't do that. Watch me." Nila rubbed her wrists, eyes fixed on Jack, not in fear, but in cautious surprise. For the first time since he saw her, she looked less like someone waiting for fate and more like someone preparing to choose it. Jack turned back to the barker. "Her tribe, have you tried contacting them?" "Not my problem," the man snapped. "It's mine now," Jack said. And with those words, spoken in front of half of Red Butte, Jack Harper took his first step into a world far larger, darker, and more meaningful than his quiet ranch life had ever been. Nila stepped down from the wagon and stood beside him, no longer a prize but a person reclaiming her freedom. For several heartbeats, the fairground felt frozen, dust hanging in the air, eyes locked on the unlikely pair standing together. Nila stepped away from the wagon slowly, as if giving herself permission to move freely again. Jack positioned himself between her and the furious barker without even realizing he'd done it. "Harper, you're making a mistake," the barker hissed. "You'll get the law on your back." Jack folded his arms. "Go ahead. Tell Sheriff Morgan you were selling people. I'm sure he'll love hearing that." The barker's face drained of color. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Nobody wanted to be associated with what had just been exposed. The fair workers hurriedly disappeared behind tents, pretending to have nothing to do with it. Jack turned toward Nila. "Let's get out of here," he said quietly. Nila didn't move at first. She scanned the crowd, then the distant rooftops, as if calculating every possible danger. Finally, she nodded and followed him. They walked toward his horse, a big chestnut gelding named Ranger. Jack paused, unsure how to help without insulting her independence. "You can ride him," he said gently. "Or walk beside me. Whatever you prefer." Nila placed a hand on the horse's neck. Ranger snorted softly, sensing her caution. After a moment, she stepped back and gestured forward. "You ride," she said. "I walk." Jack shook his head. "You've been through enough. Take the saddle." She studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read, part suspicion, part curiosity, part something else. Finally, she mounted in one smooth, practiced motion, revealing a natural ease around horses. Jack walked beside her as they left the fairground. Only when they were several streets away did Nila speak again. "You cut the rope," she said, not as a question but a statement. "Someone had to," Jack replied. Didn't seem like anyone else was stepping up. Nila looked ahead. Most do not step up. They turn away. Jack didn't have an answer to that, not one that would sound anything but hollow, so he stayed quiet. They reached the edge of town, where the land opened into rolling desert hills. Jack stopped and adjusted Ranger's reins. "My ranch isn't far. You can rest there. After that, if you want to go anywhere, back to your people, to another town, I'll help you get there." Nila's gaze sharpened. "Why help me?" Jack took a long breath. He'd asked himself the same question. The truth was simple, though not easy to say. Because what they were doing back there was wrong. And because no one deserves to be alone after something like that. Nila considered his words, searching for any hidden motive. She seemed to find none. As they continued walking, clouds began to gather over the distant mountains. Nila studied the sky. "Storm," she murmured. "Yeah," Jack said. "Monsoon season's early this year." Nila tilted her head. "No. Different kind of storm." Jack didn't know what she meant, but he felt it too, a tension in the wind. Something was coming. Something bigger than either of them expected. By the time they reached the ranch, Jack realized his life had already shifted. The quiet days he once knew were gone. Whatever the storm was, past, present, or future, it now belonged to both of them. Jack's ranch sat in a quiet valley framed by rugged ridgelines and open sky. When he and Nila approached, the sun was dipping behind the mountains, staining the horizon in deep orange. The air smelled of dry grass and the first hints of a coming storm. Nila took it all in, the fences, the grazing cattle, the distant barn, as if memorizing the layout of a new battlefield. Old Sam Dorsey, Jack's foreman and the ranch's unofficial guardian, stepped out of the barn wiping his hands on a rag. His grizzled beard and sun-baked skin made him look like he'd been carved from the land itself. "You're back late," Sam called, then stopped when he saw Nila. His eyes narrowed, not in hostility but in calculation, the way a seasoned scout sizes up a situation. "Everything all right, Jack?" Jack nodded. "We ran into trouble at the fair. This is Nila. She'll be staying here for a while." Sam didn't ask questions. He knew Jack well enough to trust his judgment, but his gaze softened when it landed on Nila. "You hungry?" he asked. Nila hesitated, unsure if the offer was genuine. Jack gave her a reassuring nod. Sam smiled. "Come on then. I made stew." Inside the small ranch house, dinner was simple but warm. Nila ate quietly, every emotion controlled, as if she wasn't used to food she didn't have to fight for. Jack watched her without staring, admiring the way she carried herself, alert, dignified even in exhaustion. After the meal, Jack showed her around the ranch. She listened more than she spoke, absorbing details, the locations of gates, the water troughs, the tools. Finally, he led her to a small bunkhouse used by ranch hands during roundup season. "You can stay here," Jack said. "It's yours for as long as you need." Nila stepped inside, trailing her fingers over the simple wooden furniture. A bed, a chair, a small stove. To most, it would seem modest. To someone who'd been held captive, it must have looked like a palace. She turned back to Jack. "You give me a room," she said quietly. "Not chains." Jack swallowed. "No one deserves chains." Rain began to tap against the tin roof, soft at first, then steadily. Jack lingered in the doorway, unsure if he should leave. Nila studied him with that same searching look she'd given him all day. "You are different," she said finally. "Most men would not have done what you did." Jack shrugged. "Maybe. But I didn't do anything special." Nila shook her head. "You did more than you know." Then she stepped back, giving a small nod, dismissal mixed with gratitude. Jack understood. She needed space, not conversation. He closed the door gently and walked back through the rain, his boots splashing in the mud. Lightning split the sky in the distance. Sam waited on the porch, smoking his pipe. "You picked up a storm today," Sam murmured. Jack stared at the bunkhouse's glowing window. "Yeah," he said. "And something tells me it's only just beginning." The next morning dawned cool and washed clean from the rain. A thin mist hung over the valley, softening the edges of the ranch buildings. Jack stepped out of the house with a mug of coffee, expecting a quiet start to the day. Instead, he found Sam standing near the corral, staring in disbelief. Jack followed his gaze, and stopped. Nila stood in the middle of the pen with one of the wild mares, a chestnut with a dangerous streak. That horse had thrown every ranch hand who'd tried to break her. Yet there Nila was, calm, steady, one hand outstretched while the mare circled her like a drawn bowstring ready to snap. "What in the—" Sam muttered. The mare snorted, pawing the ground. But Nila didn't flinch. She moved deliberately, her steps matching the animal's rhythm, her posture relaxed, unafraid. She murmured something under her breath, words neither English nor Spanish, carried like a prayer or a memory. The mare slowed. Then, astonishingly, she pressed her nose gently into Nila's palm. Jack blinked. Sam dropped his rag. Nila stroked the mare's neck once, then stepped away, letting the animal decide what to do. The mare followed her, completely transformed. Jack approached cautiously. "How did you do that?" Nila shrugged as if it were nothing. "Horses feel what people hide. Fear, anger, lies. You show none of these to her, she listens." Sam whistled. "Miss, you just accomplished what I've been sworn at for 6 months trying." A faint smile touched Nila's lips, not pride, but acknowledgement. She handed the reins to Sam and walked toward the water pump. Jack joined her. "You grew up with horses." "Since I could walk," she replied. "My father said a horse knows your heart before your name." Jack nodded slowly. "Sounds about right." They worked side by side through the day. Nila was efficient and strong, learning tasks almost before Jack finished explaining them. She fixed a loose fence post, sharpened tools, even helped Sam identify a calf with an infected hoof. Wordlessly, seamlessly, she fit herself into ranch life, not as a guest but as someone determined to contribute. Around noon, a couple of riders passed by, traders who moved between settlements. They greeted Jack warmly, but their eyes lingered too long on Nila. She noticed but didn't show discomfort. Instead, she stepped closer to Jack, a subtle signal of caution. One rider spit tobacco and muttered, "Looks like you picked up something interesting, Harper." Jack's jaw tightened. "She's a guest. And under my protection." The rider raised his hands innocently. Just making conversation. But Jack knew better. Trouble had a way of traveling the frontier faster than horses. Later, inside the barn, Nila cleaned tack while Jack sorted supplies. "That man," she said without looking up, "he was thinking of taking me." Jack met her steady gaze. "He won't. Not while I'm breathing." She studied him a moment longer, then nodded as if accepting his promise. That afternoon, they spread maps on the table, marking areas where Apache camps had been seen in the past months. Nila traced the paths with her fingertips, gentle, longing, determined. "We will find them," Jack said. Nila didn't smile, but her eyes, for the first time, held something brighter than wariness. They set out before sunrise 2 days later, the world still hushed under a blanket of silver morning light. Jack rode Ranger, while Nila rode the same chestnut mare she had calmed in the corral, now loyal to her as if they had shared a lifetime together. Sam watched them leave from the porch, arms folded, concern etched into every line on his weathered face. "Keep your head low and your heart steady," he called. Nila touched 2 fingers to her forehead in a silent farewell. Jack tipped his hat and followed her. Toward the open land, the trail was long and shifting. Dry gullies cut across the desert like scars, and the wind carried dust devils that danced recklessly across their path. Nila rode ahead, studying the land with a tracker's instinct, spotting broken branches, faint footprints, ashes left from cooking fires. Jack had ridden these territories for years, but beside her he felt almost blind. She saw meaning in everything. By midday the heat pressed down on them. They stopped near a cluster of boulders for shade. Jack passed Nila a canteen. She took it, hesitated, then handed it back. "You drink first," she said. Jack frowned. "Why?" "Because trust is not made with words. Only actions." He took a long drink and handed it back. This time she accepted it without hesitation. As they resumed riding, the land grew harsher, steeper ridges, narrow passes, and places where the silence felt too intentional. Jack kept his hand near his revolver. Nila kept her senses sharp, eyes scanning like a hawk's. Just before dusk, they entered a canyon where the walls rose high and tight. Jack didn't like it. "Place feels like a trap," he muttered. Nila nodded. "Because it is." Before Jack could ask what she meant, a rifle shot cracked through the canyon. Ranger reared, and the chestnut mare danced sideways. Dust exploded near Jack's boot. "Down!" Nila shouted. They threw themselves behind a rock as 3 riders appeared on the cliffs above, outlaws Jack recognized from wanted posters. Horse thieves. Slave traders. Men who saw Nila not as a person, but as prophet. One of them laughed. "Look what we got here." Harper and his fancy new companion. Jack's blood boiled. "You boys best ride on," he called. "No need for gunplay." "Oh, there's need," another outlaw replied. "Girl like that fetches good money. Hand her over and we'll let you walk." Nila's face hardened, not with fear, but with a quiet fury. She whispered, "They know these lands well. They don't expect a fight." Jack smirked. "Well, they're about to get one." On her signal, they moved. Nila scrambled up the canyon wall with surprising agility, drawing fire away from Jack. He used the distraction to shoot the rifle out of one outlaw's hands. Rocks tumbled, dust swirled, shouts echoed. Nila reached the top ridge, disarmed the nearest man with a swift kick, and sent him tumbling into the sand below, alive but humiliated. The remaining outlaws fled, cursing as they disappeared into the fading light. Breathing hard, Jack climbed to Nila's side. "You all right?" Nila nodded, though her breath shook slightly. "You fight with heart," she said. "Not just with guns." Jack gave a tired grin. "You're not so bad yourself." They set camp at the canyon's mouth, building a small fire that flickered against the stone walls. The stars emerged one by one, scattered across the sky like ancient stories. As they sat in the quiet, Nila spoke softly. "Now you see why I must find my people. Alone, I am hunted. With them, I am whole. Jack looked at her, illuminated by firelight. Then we'll find them, no matter how long it takes. Nila didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Her silence was acceptance. By dawn, the canyon was bathed in a soft amber light. Jack and Nila packed their camp silently, the night's tension still clinging to their bones. Ranger and the chestnut mare nickered as they adjusted the saddles and bridles, sensing the urgency in their riders. Nila checked the horizon, eyes narrowing as she studied the faint traces of movement, the tracks of people, horses, and fire, faint but unmistakable. They've passed through recently, she said quietly, tracing the path with a finger in the dirt. 2 days at most. Jack frowned. How can you tell? The earth remembers, Nila replied. Simply. It tells me what it saw. You only have to know how to listen. They followed the trail carefully, keeping a slow, deliberate pace. The terrain grew rougher, twisted mesquite, thorny shrubs, and dry gullies that threatened to trip a horse. Yet Nila moved with a precision and confidence that made Jack feel like a clumsy apprentice beside a master. Every step she took was deliberate, measured, yet fluid, an instinct honed by months, perhaps years, of survival. By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of a narrow valley, where small fires still smoked faintly among scattered rocks. Jack halted Ranger. Looks like a camp, he whispered. Nila dismounted, moving quietly, scanning every inch of the clearing. Not ours, she said after a moment. But they left recently, someone passed this way after us. Scouts, maybe. Jack's hand went to his revolver. We follow. Nila shook her head. Not yet. We need a vantage point. They climbed a small rise overlooking the valley, the wind carrying the faint scent of wood smoke, dried meat, and leather. And then, just over a ridge, Jack saw movement, 3 figures on horseback, warriors, alert and cautious, clearly Apache, scanning the horizon. Nila's eyes widened ever so slightly. She whispered, they are scouts. They will lead us to my people. They waited, hidden among the rocks, as the scouts circled the area and disappeared from view. Nila studied the ridge lines, memorizing every turn and shadow. They are not far, she said. We will find them by nightfall tomorrow if we move carefully. As the sun sank low, casting long shadows across the valley, Jack realized how much danger still lay ahead. Even with Nila's skill and knowledge, the terrain, the outlaws, and the uncertainty of the frontier made every step precarious. Yet he also realized something else. He trusted her implicitly, not just with survival, but with guiding them to something he had never seen, a life beyond his own small world. That night, they camped on the ridge. Jack kept watch while Nila slept lightly, her body coiled like a spring ready to react. He thought about the past weeks, the fair, the confrontation, the rescue, the journey through the canyon, and realized that every step had brought him closer to understanding courage, resilience, and the quiet strength of a person determined to reclaim their life. When Nila finally stirred, she spoke softly. Tomorrow, we will see them. Jack nodded. We will. The stars stretched across the sky like a silver map, guiding their path in a wilderness that seemed both endless and intimate. Jack felt the weight of responsibility and hope settle together. They were close now. Very close. The reunion Nila longed for, and the freedom she had fought for, was just over the next ridge. He didn't know what would happen when they finally reached her tribe. But for the first time in years, Jack Harper felt that destiny, hard and unpredictable as it might be, was within reach. Nila turned her face to the sky, and for the first time, Jack saw something softer in her eyes, anticipation, relief, and the faintest trace of joy. The next morning, the valley was quiet except for the distant call of birds. Jack and Nila moved cautiously down the ridgeline, every sense alert. Nila's chestnut mare picked her way along the rocky slope with the grace of one who knows every inch of the land. Jack followed Ranger, trusting her instincts completely. The faint traces of fire, footprints, and broken twigs grew stronger, signs that they were very close. They've been here recently, Nila whispered, eyes scanning the terrain. Less than a day ago. We're on the right path. Jack nodded, tightening the reins. He had learned to trust her almost instinctively. Over the past week, he had seen courage, skill, and intelligence in every one of Nila's actions. She had navigated through danger, taught him patience, and kept them both alive. As the sun dipped lower, they spotted movement on a distant ridge, figures on horseback, clearly Apache scouts, scanning the horizon. Nila's eyes brightened for the first time in weeks. She nudged her mare forward carefully, signaling Jack to stay low. "Follow me," she whispered. "We move slow, quiet. They'll sense our presence if we rush." They approached the scouts cautiously, keeping to the shadows of boulders and brush. Jack's heart pounded as the first scout turned, bow ready, eyes sharp. But Nila didn't panic. She stepped forward, calling out in her native language. Jack watched, tense, as the scouts froze, then lowered their weapons. One scout, older than the others, rode forward and dismounted. "Nila?" he asked. His voice was a mixture of disbelief and relief. Nila dismounted quickly and ran toward him. Tears welled in her eyes as she threw herself into the arms of the elder. "It's me," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm here." Jack stayed back, giving them the space they needed. He could see the reunion was everything Nila had dreamed of, raw, emotional, and powerful. The other scouts approached, surrounding them with cautious smiles. Nila's tribe had accepted her back without hesitation, recognizing her immediately. Finally, Nila turned to Jack, her eyes shining. "You found me," she said softly. "You brought me home." Jack shook his head, a small smile on his lips. "I didn't find you. You led me here. I just followed." She laughed softly, the sound bright and free. "You saved me anyway." The elder nodded to Jack. "You have done a great service," he said. "You brought her safely, and for that, you are welcome among us." Jack tipped his hat. "I only did what was right." For the first time in months, Nila was free, not just in body, but in spirit. She spent the evening with her people, telling stories, sharing laughter, and reconnecting with those she had feared she would never see again. Jack watched quietly, realizing that some victories are measured not by wealth or fame, but by restoring someone's life, their dignity, and their hope. When it was time to leave, Nila walked beside Jack to the valley's edge. "Our paths will cross again," she said with certainty. Jack smiled. "I know they will." He rode back toward his ranch as the sun set behind the mountains, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. Nila's freedom had changed him too. He now understood courage, trust, and the weight of doing what is right in a world that often chooses the easy path. And somewhere along that vast Arizona horizon, Jack Harper knew that the story wasn't over. It had only begun.